Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. For years now, we have known that it is possible to prevent children and adolescents from starting to use any kind of drugs, legal or illegal. We have over more than the past 20 years worked hand in hand, scientists, politicians and practitioners, on developing a methodology that proves that children and adolescents can be directed away from drugs, that they do not need to start using drugs. This we will discuss here today, the core of the Planet Youth methodology. During the late 90s, 1998 or around so, Iceland scored amongst the highest in Europe in adolescent substance use. Over 40% of our 15 and 16-year-olds were getting drunk once per month or even more than that. And lifetime prevalence of using cannabis was around 17% in this age group. This situation was not considered acceptable by our society, and actions were taken. Our society felt a sense of urgency, a need to change the situation, a need to make sure that children did not start using any kind of drugs, legal or illegal. This, however, is not always the fact that there is a sense of urgency. And this is a challenge in some countries. Sometimes we experience that the adult population sees nothing wrong in adolescents starting to use substances, often claiming, hey, I used to drink when I was at this age and I'm totally fine. The acceptability is normalized, which is a frightening fact, and industries are promoting this way of thinking. In the late 90s in Iceland, we could see from our data which environmental factors needed to be addressed in order to prevent children from starting to use substances. We looked at all the possible correlations, and we could see which factors in the environment were either connected with adolescents starting to use drugs, and also the factors connected with not starting to use drugs. We could see that parental involvement and empowerment was crucial. The importance of school well-being, the importance of providing lots and lots of organized activities of the highest quality. Many of these actions aimed at changing the environment of our youth in such a way that they had far more interesting and healthy things to do than to start using drugs. Only 8 years later, in 2005-06 or so, substance use was down by around 50% in all categories amongst 15 and 16-year-old adolescents in Iceland. Another 8 years after that, substance use amongst our youth had become amongst the lowest in the whole of Europe, and it still is in the year 2021. This development did not happen by coincidence. It was due to a carefully planned collaboration led by people who are responsible for children's well-being in the different municipalities. And most importantly, this was based on a long-term thinking, not short-term projects and grants. The Planet Youth methodology has been introduced in countries in 5 continents and already implemented in hundreds of municipalities and cities. The methodology has been well received, and people see the sense in it all. But there are challenges. There are obstacles that we need to overcome. In many cities and municipalities, we need to change the way we approach prevention. Far too often, prevention efforts are based on short-term funded projects. Practitioners apply for funding, sometimes they get funded, then they start a prevention project, work on it for a year or two, and then they apply for funding again. If the project is not funded again, all the work is wasted and can perhaps start again later or even not. This kind of insecurity in prevention work is intolerable. So what needs to change? We need to start looking at preventing children from using drugs as an investment in the lives and future of our children and youth. We need to stop thinking short term when it comes to drug prevention. Politicians need to start looking at preventing our children from using drugs as a long-term task, even a task that may override their term in the government or city council. If we look at the other side of the coin, the industry producing and promoting the use of legal and illegal drugs, there is no short-term thinking. All strategic, long-term, with no pauses, every now and then, but constant and steady 24/7 work every day of the year. The industries, tobacco, vaping, cannabis, and alcohol, are heavily promoting their products and even aiming some of their efforts towards our youth, our children. They would probably deny this, but I have difficulties understanding how certain products should be attracting grown-up people. Call me old-fashioned. The industries are even supporting children's leisure activities in many countries. In some countries, the youth work has become dependent on the support from the industries. A recent study claims, quote, "The alcohol industry accounts for roughly 20% of all sports sponsorships internationally. This is despite evidence showing that direct alcohol sponsorship of sports is associated with more hazardous drinking and that large numbers of children are exposed to alcohol messages while watching sports." End of quote. This, however, is a reality that we cannot change. This will continue, and the drug industry will continue marketing its merchandise to everyone who possibly would use it, young and old. However, we can do other things. We can have an impact in preventing children and adolescents from starting to use drugs of any form, something that you will hear more about today. Everywhere we go, parents are afraid that their children will become addicted to legal or illegal drugs. Everywhere we work, there are practitioners working day and night in prevention, trying to prevent children and adolescents from becoming addicted. Their challenge is enormous, but by joining forces between politicians, practitioners, and scientists in working together in a structured and organized manner, we can make a change. It is our responsibility to do everything in our power to prevent children and adolescents from starting to use drugs. We know of proven methods that prevent children from starting to use drugs. We have the knowledge. Let's use that knowledge. Thank you and have a good day.